Sarah Mitchell wiped the sweat from her forehead as she aimed her father's old hunting rifle at the rusty can perched on the fence post nearly 400 yards away. The Montana wind whistled through the wheat fields, but her breathing remained steady, controlled. She had been practicing this shot every evening for 3 months, ever since she made the decision that would change her life forever. The crack of the rifle echoed across the family farm as the can disappeared in a shower of metal fragments. Her younger brother Jake whooped from the porch, but Sarah barely heard him. Her mind was already calculating wind speed, bullet drop, and the dozens of other variables that separated a good shot from a perfect one. At 22, Sarah had never been more than 50 miles from the small town of Whitefish, Montana. She had grown up helping her father manage their cattle ranch, learning to shoot before she could properly ride a horse. Her mother had died when Sarah was 15, leaving her to help raise Jake and maintain the household while her father worked himself to exhaustion trying to keep the ranch profitable. The drought of 2008 had nearly destroyed them. Crop failures, rising feed costs, and mounting debt had pushed the Mitchell family to the edge of bankruptcy. Sarah watched her father age 10 years in one summer, his shoulders growing more stooped with each passing month as the bills piled higher than the hay in their barns. That autumn evening, as she sat at the kitchen table helping Jake with his homework, the television news showed footage from Afghanistan. American soldiers moved through dusty villages, their faces hidden behind sunglasses and camouflage paint. The reporter spoke about the ongoing conflict, the need for skilled personnel, and the signing bonuses available for certain military specialties. Sarah's attention sharpened when they mentioned sniper training and the substantial enlistment incentives for marksmen. The signing bonus alone would cover the ranch's debts and provide enough cushion to get them through the next few difficult seasons. More importantly, her military salary would ensure Jake could finish high school and maybe even attend college, something that seemed impossible given their current financial situation. She had always been the protector in the family, the one who scared off the coyotes threatening their livestock, who could drop a deer with a single shot to feed them through the winter. The idea of using those same skills to serve her country while saving her family's legacy felt like destiny calling. Her father, Tom Mitchell, was less enthusiastic when she broached the subject over dinner the next evening. His weathered hands gripped his coffee mug tightly as she explained her plan to enlist in the Army and pursue sniper training. "Sarah, you're talking about going to war," he said quietly, his voice heavy with concern. "This isn't like hunting deer in the back pasture. People will be shooting back." "I know, Dad," Sarah replied, her green eyes steady and determined. "But we're about to lose everything anyway. This could save the ranch and give Jake a real future. You know I can outshoot anyone in 3 counties." Tom couldn't argue with that. Sarah had been winning shooting competitions since she was 16, often beating men twice her age with decades more experience. Local hunting guides regularly hired her to track wounded animals because of her uncanny ability to follow trails and make impossible shots through dense forest. Jake, now 17 and acutely aware of their family's financial struggles, surprised them both by supporting Sarah's decision. "She's the best shot I've ever seen," he said simply. "If anyone can do this, it's her." The conversation continued late into the night, with Tom sharing stories of his own military service during the Gulf War. He had been a mechanic, safe behind the lines, but he had seen enough to understand the realities of combat. Eventually, worn down by Sarah's determination and their desperate circumstances, he gave his reluctant blessing. Sarah spent the next 6 months preparing for military life. She ran 5 miles every morning before dawn, practiced shooting in all weather conditions, and studied everything she could find about military tactics and sniper techniques. She read accounts from famous snipers, memorized ballistics tables, and even convinced the local police chief to let her observe their SWAT team training exercises. The day she left for basic training, half the town gathered at the bus station to see her off. Sarah had always been popular in Whitefish, known for her kindness and willingness to help anyone in need. She had tutored struggling students, helped elderly neighbors with their shopping, and volunteered at the animal shelter every weekend. Mrs. Henderson, her old high school math teacher, pressed a small Bible into her hands as she boarded the bus. "You bring yourself home safe, Sarah Mitchell," she said with tears in her eyes. "This town needs people like you." The ride to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, took 14 hours, giving Sarah plenty of time to think about what lay ahead. She had never been away from home for more than a few days, never lived anywhere without the sight of snow-capped mountains on the horizon. But as the landscape changed from familiar wheat fields to unknown territory, her resolve only strengthened. Basic training proved to be everything she had expected and more. The drill sergeants were relentless, the physical demands exhausting, and the mental pressure intense. But Sarah had been doing hard physical work her entire life, and her farm girl toughness served her well. While other recruits struggled with the early morning runs, she barely broke sweat. When others complained about the food, she remembered the lean winters when they had eaten nothing but potatoes and canned vegetables for weeks. More importantly, she excelled on a rifle range. During their first marksmanship training, Sarah consistently scored in the expert range, while most of her fellow recruits struggled to achieve marksman status. Her drill sergeant, Staff Sergeant Martinez, noticed immediately. "Mitchell," he barked after she put 10 rounds through the same hole at 300 yards. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "Montana, Drill Sergeant," Sarah replied crisply. "My father taught me when I was 8 years old." Martinez examined her target through binoculars, shaking his head in amazement. In 15 years of training recruits, he had rarely seen natural marksmanship ability like this. He made a note in Sarah's file that would later prove crucial to her future assignments. As basic training progressed, Sarah's reputation grew among both the drill instructors and her fellow recruits. She helped struggling soldiers improve their shooting technique, often staying after hours on the range to work with anyone who asked for help. Her patient teaching style and genuine desire to see everyone succeed earned her respect throughout the company. During their final field exercise, Sarah's squad was tasked with securing a mock village from enemy forces. As they moved through the urban training environment, they came under simulated sniper fire from a tower nearly 600 yards away. The exercise called for them to locate and eliminate the threat, but the distance was considered too great for standard infantry weapons. Sarah studied the tower through her rifle scope, calculating wind drift and elevation. Without waiting for orders, she adjusted her position, steadied her breathing, and fired a single shot. The laser training system immediately registered a hit, and the opposing force sniper was ruled eliminated. The range safety officer, a grizzled master sergeant with over 20 years of experience, was monitoring the exercise from the control tower. He had been expecting the drill to last at least another hour as the recruits struggled to close distance or call for support. Sarah's instant solution to the problem caught everyone's attention. After the exercise concluded, Master Sergeant Williams approached Sarah privately. "Soldier, have you given any thought to advanced training opportunities?" Sarah knew he was referring to specialized schools like sniper training, but she had been told that such opportunities were rarely offered to new recruits, especially women. The military had only recently opened combat roles to female soldiers, and sniper positions remained largely male-dominated. "I'd be interested in any training that would make me a better soldier, Master Sergeant," she replied carefully. Williams nodded approvingly. "I'm going to put in a recommendation for you. Can't promise anything, but that shot you made today was something special. The Army needs shooters like you." On graduation day, as Sarah stood in formation with her fellow soldiers, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had not only completed one of the most challenging experiences of her life, but had distinguished herself in the process. The scared farm girl who had boarded a bus in Montana 4 months earlier was gone, replaced by a confident soldier ready to serve her country. During the graduation ceremony, Sarah's company was addressed by Colonel Patricia Hayes, one of the highest-ranking female officers on the base. She spoke about the changing role of women in the military and the opportunities available to those willing to work for them. "The modern battlefield requires soldiers who are smart, dedicated, and willing to push beyond traditional boundaries," Colonel Hayes said, her eyes scanning the formation. "I see many of you here today who have that potential. Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do based on anything other than your own abilities and determination." Sarah felt those words resonate deep in her chest. She thought about the doubters back home who had questioned whether a woman could handle military life, about the financial pressures that had driven her to this point, and about the family counting on her success. After the ceremony, she called home from the base phone center. Jake answered, and she could hear the excitement in his voice as she described the graduation ceremony and her upcoming assignment to advanced individual training for infantry soldiers. Dad's been following the news about Afghanistan, Jake told her. He's worried, but he's proud too. The whole town is talking about you. Mrs. Henderson has been telling everyone that she always knew you were destined for great things. Sarah smiled, picturing the small-town gossip network that kept Whitefish connected. She knew that her success or failure would be discussed in detail at the diner, the hardware store, and every other gathering place in town. The weight of representing not just herself, but her entire community felt heavy on her shoulders. As she hung up the phone and prepared for the next phase of her military journey, Sarah couldn't know that her path would lead to the mountains of Afghanistan, to moments of triumph and terror that would test every skill she had learned on the family farm. She couldn't foresee the day when a room full of seasoned warriors would laugh at her request for a rifle, or the 3 words that would silence their laughter forever. For now, she was simply Private Sarah Mitchell, a young soldier with exceptional marksmanship skills and an unshakable determination to succeed. The legend of Black Talon was still years away, waiting to be born in the crucible of combat, where heroes are forged from courage and skill in equal measure. The Advanced Individual Training Facility at Fort Benning, Georgia, was a world away from the wheat fields of Montana. Sarah arrived on a sweltering summer morning, her dress uniform already wilting in the oppressive humidity. The base buzzed with activity as thousands of soldiers moved between training areas, their boots creating a constant rhythm on the concrete pathways. Sarah's first few weeks focused on infantry tactics, urban warfare, and advanced marksmanship. She quickly established herself as the top shooter in her class, but it was her tactical intelligence that truly impressed her instructors. During simulated combat exercises, she demonstrated an uncanny ability to read terrain, predict enemy movements, and position herself for maximum effectiveness. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, her primary instructor, had been skeptical when he first saw Sarah's name on his roster. In his 12 years of training infantry soldiers, he had seen few women attempt the program, and fewer still who possessed the mental toughness required for combat roles. But Sarah's performance on the range and her analytical approach to tactical problems quickly changed his mind. Mitchell, front and center, Rodriguez called out after a particularly challenging exercise where Sarah had successfully eliminated multiple targets while remaining completely undetected by the opposing force. Sarah jogged over, her rifle slung across her back, and her uniform barely showing the strain of 3 hours of intense movement through difficult terrain. While her classmates were breathing heavily and showing obvious signs of fatigue, she appeared ready for another round. "Tell me about that last engagement," Rodriguez said, pulling out a notepad. "Walk me through your decision-making process." Sarah described how she had identified the optimal firing position by studying the terrain from multiple angles, how she had calculated the wind patterns by observing vegetation movement, and how she had timed her shots to coincide with natural noise cover from aircraft overhead. Her explanation was methodical, professional, and demonstrated a level of tactical thinking that typically took years to develop. Rodriguez made detailed notes as she spoke. That evening, he placed a call to his old friend, Master Sergeant Kevin Thompson, who ran the pre-selection process for the Army's elite sniper school. The conversation would prove to be a turning point in Sarah's military career. "Kevin, I got a soldier you need to see," Rodriguez said. "Natural shooter, incredible tactical mind, and tougher than most of the men I've trained. I think she's got what it takes for your program." Master Sergeant Thompson had heard similar claims before, but Rodriguez's judgment was impeccable. If he was willing to stake his reputation on a recommendation, the soldier in question must be truly exceptional. Thompson agreed to observe Sarah during her final training exercises. 3 days later, Sarah noticed a senior non-commissioned officer watching from the observation tower during their culminating field exercise. She didn't recognize him, but something about his intense focus and The way he took notes suggested this was more than routine supervision. The exercise pitted her squad against a well-trained opposing force in a complex urban environment. Sarah's team was tasked with gathering intelligence on enemy positions while avoiding detection. Most squads attempted to complete the mission through stealth and close observation, but Sarah proposed a different approach. "Sergeant, request permission to establish an overwatch position," she said to her squad leader during their initial planning session. The squad leader, a veteran sergeant named Jackson who had served 2 tours in Iraq, looked skeptical. "Mitchell, the furthest building is 800 meters from the target area. That's beyond effective range for standard infantry weapons." "Not for me, Sergeant," Sarah replied confidently. "I can provide accurate intelligence and covering fire from that distance. It would also allow the rest of the squad to move closer without worrying about being compromised by a sniper." Jackson studied the terrain through binoculars, then looked back at Sarah. He had seen her shoot, and he knew her capabilities. After a moment's consideration, he nodded. "Do it. But if you miss your shots, we all fail this exercise." Sarah spent the next hour moving carefully through the urban training area, using shadows and covered routes to reach her chosen position undetected. The building she selected offered excellent fields of fire and multiple escape routes, exactly the kind of position a professional sniper would choose in actual combat. From her perch on the 4th floor, Sarah could observe the entire enemy compound through a rifle scope. She began methodically cataloging defensive positions, patrol patterns, and potential vulnerabilities. Using a small notepad, she sketched the layout and timed the movements of opposing force members. When her squad began their approach 2 hours later, Sarah was ready. As Jackson's team moved through the urban maze below, she provided real-time intelligence through a radio, guiding them around obstacles and warning them of approaching patrols. The first test came when an opposing force sniper took position in a window 600 meters away and began engaging Sarah's squad. The range was too great for effective return fire with standard weapons, but Sarah had a clear shot. She adjusted her scope, calculated for wind and elevation, and fired a single round that would have been lethal in actual combat. The exercise controllers immediately ruled the enemy sniper eliminated, allowing Sarah's squad to complete their mission without casualties. But the most impressive moment came during their extraction. As Jackson's team withdrew under simulated enemy fire, Sarah provided precise covering fire that neutralized multiple threats and ensured their safe escape. Master Sergeant Thompson watched the entire engagement from the control tower, his experienced eye noting every tactical decision and shot placement. When the exercise concluded, he was already planning his recommendation for Sarah's advancement to sniper preselection. That evening, Sarah was called to the company headquarters building. She assumed she was being debriefed about the day's training, but instead found herself face-to-face with Thompson and Rodriguez. "Private Mitchell," Thompson began, his voice formal but not unfriendly. "I've been observing your training, and Sergeant Rodriguez speaks very highly of your abilities. Have you considered pursuing specialized training opportunities?" Sarah's heart began to race. She knew exactly what he was referring to, but she had been told repeatedly that sniper school was nearly impossible to get into and that female candidates were particularly rare. "Yes, Master Sergeant," she replied. "I'd welcome any opportunity to serve more effectively." Thompson nodded approvingly. "The Army Sniper School is one of the most demanding training programs in our military. The physical requirements are extreme, the mental pressure is intense, and the failure rate is over 70%. But for those who succeed, it represents the pinnacle of marksmanship and tactical expertise." He paused, studying Sarah's face for any sign of uncertainty or hesitation. Finding none, he continued. "Based on your performance here and Sergeant Rodriguez's recommendation, I'm prepared to nominate you for preselection. This would involve additional testing and evaluation, but if you pass, you would be eligible for sniper school. Are you interested?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "Absolutely, Master Sergeant." The preselection process began the following week and proved to be the most challenging experience of Sarah's life. Days started before dawn with grueling physical training that pushed her endurance to its limits. She carried heavy packs over long distances, navigated obstacle courses under time pressure, and endured stress tests designed to break down mental barriers. The marksmanship requirements were unlike anything she had encountered. Candidates were required to make precise shots at extreme distances, often under adverse conditions with inadequate rest and minimal preparation time. Sarah's natural ability served her well, but she also discovered that her farm background had given her advantages she hadn't fully appreciated. Growing up in Montana's harsh climate had taught her to function effectively in extreme weather. She had made successful hunting shots in blizzards, high winds, and bitter cold that would have defeated less experienced shooters. The psychological pressure of the pre-selection process, while intense, paled in comparison to the responsibility she had felt providing food for her family during difficult winters. Perhaps most importantly, Sarah possessed the patience and mental discipline that separated truly elite marksmen from merely skilled shooters. She had spent countless hours as a teenager waiting motionlessly for deer to appear, learning to control her breathing and heart rate during extended periods of absolute stillness. These skills translated perfectly to the sniper's trade. The written examinations cover ballistics, meteorology, camouflage techniques, and tactical planning. Sarah studied with the same intensity she had brought to everything else in her military career, often staying up late into the night memorizing ballistics tables and wind calculation formulas. Her fellow candidates were an impressive group. Most were seasoned soldiers with multiple deployments and years of combat experience. Several had already attended other elite schools like Ranger training or Special Forces qualification. Sarah was not only the youngest candidate, but also the only woman in a group of 35 highly qualified soldiers. Initially, some of her fellow candidates were skeptical about her presence in the program. During their first week, she overheard several conversations questioning whether the standards were being lowered to accommodate female soldiers. Rather than becoming defensive or angry, Sarah decided to let her performance speak for itself. The first major test came during a stalking exercise where candidates had to approach within 200 meters of trained observers without being detected. The terrain was open grassland with minimal cover, requiring exceptional skill in camouflage and movement techniques. Sarah drew on her hunting experience, remembering how she had tracked wounded elk through similar terrain. She moved slowly and deliberately, using natural depressions and vegetation to mask her approach. While other candidates struggled with the advanced ghillie suits they had been issued, Sarah adapted quickly, understanding instinctively how to use the artificial camouflage to blend with the natural environment. When the exercise concluded, only 12 of the 35 candidates had successfully completed the stalk undetected. Sarah was not only among the successful group, but had achieved the closest approach distance, getting within 75 meters of the observation post before time expired. The shooting test became progressively more challenging as the week continued. Candidates engaged targets at ranges up to 1,000 meters, often with limited information about wind conditions or target distance. Sarah's consistency was remarkable, rarely missing center mass, even under the most difficult conditions. But it was during the final exercise that Sarah truly distinguished herself. Candidates were required to plan and execute a simulated mission that involved infiltrating enemy territory, gathering intelligence, and eliminating a high-value target before extracting safely. Sarah spent hours studying aerial photographs and topographic maps of the training area, identifying multiple approach routes and contingency plans. Her briefing to the evaluators was thorough and professional, demonstrating the kind of tactical thinking that separated successful snipers from those who merely possess good marksmanship skills. The mission itself unfolded over 2 days and required Sarah to move undetected through heavily patrolled terrain, establish observation posts, and ultimately take a shot at 800 meters under challenging wind conditions. She executed the plan flawlessly, completing all objectives ahead of schedule and exfiltrating without being compromised. When the pre-selection course concluded, Master Sergeant Thompson gathered the remaining candidates for final evaluations. Only 18 of the original 35 had successfully completed all requirements, and Even some of those would not receive recommendations for sniper school. Private Mitchell Thompson called when it was Sarah's turn for individual feedback. Sarah approached his desk with her heart pounding. The past week had been the most intense experience of her life, and she had given everything she had to prove herself worthy of advancement. "Congratulations," Thompson said simply. "You're going to sniper school." The news hit her like a physical blow. She had hoped, trained, and sacrificed for this opportunity, but hearing the actual words felt surreal. Thompson handed her a folder containing orders and additional information about the upcoming training. "I'll be honest with you, Mitchell," he continued. "Sniper school is going to make this week look easy. The physical demands are greater, the mental pressure is intense, and you'll be competing against some of the finest soldiers in the Army. But based on what I've seen here, you have what it takes to succeed." That evening, Sarah called home to share the news with her family. Jake answered the phone, and she could hear the pride in his voice when she told him about her selection for sniper school. "Dad's going to be so proud," he said. "We've been following your progress, and everyone in town is talking about you. Mrs. Henderson even put an article about you in the church newsletter." Sarah laughed, imagining the small-town excitement over her military achievements. It felt strange to think that her life was becoming a source of local pride when she was thousands of miles away, living experiences that most people in Whitefish could barely imagine. Her father came on the line a few moments later, his voice thick with emotion. "Sarah, honey, I don't completely understand what you're doing down there, but I know it's important. Your mother would be so proud to see the woman you've become." As Sarah prepared for bed that night, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The scared farm girl who had left Montana was gone, replaced by a confident soldier who had proven herself against the best the Army had to offer. But she also knew that the greatest challenges lay ahead. Sniper school would test every skill she had developed, push every limit she had discovered, and ultimately determine whether she had what it took to become one of the military's most elite warriors. The legend of Black Talon was still waiting to be born, but the foundation was now in place. The United States Army Sniper School at Fort Benning was a fortress of excellence, where only the most exceptional soldiers were invited to push beyond the limits of human precision and endurance. Sarah arrived on a crisp October morning, her duffel bag containing everything she would need for the next 8 weeks of the most demanding training in the military. The course began with 24 carefully selected candidates from across the Army, each one a proven marksman with exceptional military records. Sarah was the only woman, but she had learned not to focus on that distinction. Her performance during pre-selection had earned her the right to be here, and she was determined to prove that her presence was justified. Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Webb, the lead instructor, was a legend in sniper circles. With over 15 years of experience and confirmed kills on 3 different continents, his reputation preceded him. He stood before the assembled candidates on their first morning, his weathered face showing no emotion as he examined the group. "Welcome to sniper school," Webb began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had faced death and emerged victorious. "Over the next 8 weeks, we will attempt to transform you from ordinary soldiers into precision instruments of warfare. Most of you will fail. This is not a reflection of your worth as soldiers, but simply the reality that this profession demands perfection." He paused, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. "A sniper is not simply someone who can shoot accurately. You must be able to move unseen through hostile territory, survive in isolation for days or weeks, gather intelligence under extreme pressure, and make split-second decisions that could determine the outcome of entire operations. If any of that sounds beyond your capabilities, you should leave now." No one moved. The first phase of training focused on advanced marksmanship techniques that went far beyond anything Sarah had learned in her previous training. Students learned to calculate complex ballistic solutions in their heads, accounting for factors like barometric pressure, humidity, and even the rotation of the Earth. They practiced shooting in all weather conditions, at all times of day and night, from positions that seemed impossible to ordinary infantry soldiers. Sarah excelled immediately, her natural talent combining with years of practical hunting experience to produce remarkable results. During their first week of precision shooting, she consistently placed shots within inches of center mass at distances exceeding 800 meters. Her ability to read wind conditions, developed during countless hours hunting in Montana's challenging terrain, gave her a significant advantage over candidates from more urban backgrounds. But marksmanship was only one component of sniper training. Students also learned advanced camouflage techniques, spending hours constructing ghillie suits that would render them nearly invisible in various environments. They practiced moving silently through dense vegetation, across open ground, and through urban areas without detection. The stalking exercises became increasingly difficult as the weeks progressed. Students were required to approach trained observers from distances of over a kilometer, often across terrain that seemed to offer no concealment whatsoever. Sarah's hunting background proved invaluable during these exercises, as she understood intuitively how to use natural cover and move in harmony with her environment. During one particularly challenging stalk, candidates were tasked with approaching an observation post manned by experienced snipers who knew exactly what to look for. The terrain was a mix of open grassland and scattered trees, requiring students to cover nearly 2,000 meters while remaining undetected. Sarah spent an hour studying the route through binoculars before beginning her approach. She identified natural corridors that would provide concealment, noted wind patterns that would mask any sound, and planned rest positions where she could remain motionless for extended periods if necessary. The movement itself took nearly 6 hours, with Sarah covering the distance in a series of carefully planned bounds. She moved only when aircraft overhead or other natural sound would mask any noise, remaining perfectly still whenever the observers might be scanning her area of approach. When she finally reached the designated firing position within 200 meters of the observation post, Sarah was exhausted but confident. She had maintained total concealment throughout the approach and was now in position to take the simulated shot that would complete the exercise. The target identification phase required her to spot a small target marker placed somewhere in the observation post area. Using her rifle scope, Sarah methodically scanned the position until she located the marker hidden among the equipment and personnel. Target acquired. She whispered into her radio, providing the exact description and location as required by the exercise parameters. The response from the control tower was immediate. "Excellent work, Mitchell. Exercise complete." As Sarah began her careful withdrawal from the position, she learned that she was one of only 3 candidates who had successfully completed the stalk undetected. Her consistent success in these exercises was beginning to establish a reputation among both instructors and fellow students. The academic portion of sniper training proved equally demanding. Students learned advanced ballistics calculations, meteorology, target analysis, and mission planning. They studied enemy tactics, camouflage detection techniques, and the psychological factors that influenced marksmanship under stress. Sarah approached the classroom work with the same intensity she brought to the practical exercises. She spent her evenings reviewing ballistics tables, memorizing range cards for various ammunition types, and studying the technical manuals that contained the accumulated wisdom of generations of snipers. The urban warfare phase of training introduced new challenges that tested every skill the students had developed. Operating in simulated city environments, they learned to engage targets from concealed positions in buildings, to move through urban terrain without being detected, and to gather intelligence in densely populated areas. Sarah's first urban exercise required her to establish an overwatch position in a multi-story building and observe a simulated enemy compound for intelligence gathering. The scenario was based on real-world situations that snipers regularly encountered in Iraq and Afghanistan, complete with civilian role players and complex rules of engagement. From her chosen position on the 3rd floor of an abandoned office building, Sarah could observe the target compound through her rifle scope. Over the course of 12 hours, she documented patrol patterns, identified key personnel, and noted defensive positions while remaining completely undetected. The most challenging moment came when she observed what appeared to be a high-value target moving through the compound. The scenario required her to make a positive identification and then decide whether to engage based on the rules of engagement she had been given. Sarah studied the individual through her scope, comparing his appearance to photographs she had been provided during the mission briefing. After confirming the identification, she determined that the rules of engagement authorized the shot and prepared to fire. The simulated engagement was executed perfectly, with Sarah's shot striking center mass at a range of 600 meters. The exercise controllers confirmed that all requirements had been met and that her intelligence gathering had been thorough and accurate. As the weeks progressed, the training scenarios became increasingly complex and stressful. Students were required to operate with minimal sleep, under extreme time pressure, and in situations designed to test their decision-making abilities under stress. One of the most demanding exercises placed candidates alone in the wilderness for 3 days with minimal equipment. They were required to survive in the environment while conducting observation missions and reporting intelligence on simulated enemy movements. Sarah's assignment took her to a mountainous area that reminded her of the terrain around her family's ranch in Montana. She was required to establish multiple observation posts, track enemy patrol movements, and ultimately take a long-range shot at a target that would appear at an unknown time and location. The first 2 days passed without incident as Sarah moved carefully through the mountains, establishing concealed positions and documenting the terrain. She supplemented her limited rations by foraging for edible plants, drawing on knowledge she had gained during childhood camping trips with her father. The weather turned harsh on the second night, with heavy rain and dropping temperatures that tested her survival skills. Sarah had constructed a shelter from natural materials, but staying warm and dry required constant effort. Lesser-trained soldiers might have activated their emergency beacons, but Sarah endured the discomfort and maintained her mission focus. The target finally appeared on the morning of the third day, nearly 800 meters away and visible for only a few seconds. Sarah had been scanning that area through her scope when movement caught her attention. Without hesitation, she identified the target, calculated the necessary adjustments for range and wind, and fired a single shot. The hit was confirmed immediately, and Sarah began her movement to the extraction point. When she was recovered that evening, she had successfully completed all mission requirements while demonstrating the kind of resilience and adaptability that defined elite soldiers. As the course entered its final phase, only 12 of the original 24 candidates remained. The attrition rate was typical for sniper school, but those who survived had proven themselves capable of extraordinary performance under extreme conditions. The culminating exercise was a complex scenario that combined all the skills students had learned throughout the course. Working in two-person teams, they were required to infiltrate enemy territory, conduct surveillance operations, and ultimately eliminate high-value targets before extracting safely. Sarah was partnered with Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, a veteran of multiple deployments who had initially been skeptical of her abilities. Over the weeks of training, however, he had come to respect her skills and professionalism. Their partnership had developed into one of the most effective teams in the class. Their mission required them to penetrate 15 kilometers behind enemy lines, establish an observation post overlooking a simulated terrorist training camp, and gather intelligence for 72 hours before eliminating designated targets and withdrawing. The infiltration took place over 2 nights, with Sarah and Torres moving carefully through terrain defended by experienced soldiers acting as opposing forces. They covered the distance in a series of carefully planned movements, using natural cover and their advanced camouflage skills to remain undetected. Establishing the observation post required them to construct a hide site that would conceal 2 people and their equipment while providing clear fields of fire to the target area. Sarah's experience with hunting blinds proved valuable as she helped design a position that was both functional and invisible. Over the next 3 days, they maintained constant surveillance of the training camp, documenting activities and preparing detailed intelligence reports. The physical demands were extreme, with both soldiers remaining motionless for hours at a time while maintaining alertness for any signs of discovery. The climactic moment came when their assigned targets appeared in the camp. Sarah and Torres had practiced this engagement repeatedly, with each sniper assigned specific targets to ensure simultaneous elimination. The shots had to be taken at exactly the same moment to prevent either target from alerting security forces. Sarah's target was a simulated terrorist leader who appeared briefly in a doorway 600 meters away. She had been tracking his movement patterns for 3 days and was ready when he finally presented a clear shot. "Target acquired," she whispered into radio. "Confirm ready," came Torres's response. "Execute, execute, execute," came the command from their spotter. Both snipers fired simultaneously, their shots striking their targets within a fraction of a second of each other. The exercise controllers immediately confirmed both hits, and Sarah and Torres began their carefully planned withdrawal. The extraction required them to move through increased security as opposing forces searched for the sniper team that had just eliminated their leadership. Using pre-planned routes and emergency procedures they had rehearsed, they successfully reached their pickup point 36 hours later without being detected. When Chief Warrant Officer Webb addressed the graduating class on their final day, his words carried special significance for the soldiers who had survived the grueling 8-week course. "You are now qualified Army snipers," he said, his voice reflecting genuine pride in their accomplishments. "You have demonstrated the skills, discipline, and mental toughness required for this profession. But remember that graduation from this school is just the beginning. The real test comes when you apply these skills in actual combat." Sarah stood at attention with her 11 classmates, the sniper badge now pinned to her uniform. She had not only completed one of the military's most demanding courses, but had finished second in her class overall. More importantly, she had earned the respect of her instructors and fellow students through consistent excellence and unwavering professionalism. The celebration that evening was subdued, as all the graduates knew they would soon be deployed to combat zones where their skills would be tested under actual fire. Sarah spent the time writing letters to her family, trying to convey the magnitude of what she had accomplished while downplaying the dangers that lay ahead. 3 weeks later, she received orders for deployment to Afghanistan as part of a special operations unit operating in the mountainous regions along the Pakistani border. The war was entering a new phase, with increased emphasis on precision operations that required the skills of elite soldiers like qualified snipers. As Sarah prepared for deployment, packing the specialized equipment that would keep her alive in one of the world's most dangerous environments, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The farm girl from Montana had become one of the Army's most elite warriors, but she understood that the greatest challenges still lay ahead. The legend of Black Talon was about to be born in the mountains of Afghanistan, where courage, skill, and determination would be tested in the ultimate crucible of actual combat. Sarah Mitchell was ready for whatever came next, armed with training that represented the pinnacle of military excellence, and a quiet confidence that had carried her through every challenge she had faced. The helicopter descended through the thin mountain air toward forward operating base Shank, its rotors cutting through the pre-dawn darkness of eastern Afghanistan. Sarah Mitchell peered through the small window at the rugged landscape below, her trained eye automatically cataloging terrain features and potential firing positions even in the limited visibility. After 18 hours of travel from Fort Benning through Kuwait and Bagram Air Base, she was finally arriving at her new home. The Paktika province was known as one of the most dangerous areas of operation in Afghanistan, where Taliban fighters moved freely through the mountainous terrain and American forces faced constant threat of ambush and attack. The base itself was a collection of concrete barriers, prefabricated buildings, and fighting positions carved into a valley surrounded by towering peaks. As the helicopter touched down, Sarah grabbed her gear and jogged toward the designated assembly area, where other newly arrived soldiers were being processed for assignment to their units. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Walsh, the non-commissioned officer responsible for in-processing, looked up as Sarah approached her desk. Walsh had been deployed to Afghanistan for 7 months and had the weathered appearance of someone who had seen combat firsthand. "Mitchell, right?" Walsh said, consulting her paperwork. "You're assigned to Bravo Company, 2nd Platoon. They're operating out of Combat Outpost Mitchell, about 15 kilometers north of here. Transport leaves in 2 hours." Sarah noted the coincidence of being assigned to an outpost that shared her last name, but she had learned that such things were common in military life. More importantly, she was eager to join her unit and begin the work she had trained so extensively to perform. Combat Outpost Mitchell was even more austere than the main base, consisting of little more than a few buildings surrounded by high walls and guard towers. The entire facility could have fit inside her family's barn back in Montana, but it housed nearly 40 soldiers responsible for securing a vast area of mountainous terrain. Captain James Bradley, the company commander, was a West Point graduate on his second deployment to Afghanistan. He had requested a sniper team for his unit after losing several soldiers to long-range enemy fire during recent operations. When he learned that his new sniper was a fresh graduate from sniper school with no combat experience, his initial reaction was less than enthusiastic. "Mitchell, welcome to Afghanistan," Bradley said when Sarah reported to his office. "I'll be honest with you. We need experienced shooters out here. The enemy we're facing has been fighting in these mountains for years, and they know how to use the terrain to their advantage. How much real-world experience do you have?" Sarah understood his concern. "None, sir. But I graduated second in my sniper school class, and I've been shooting in mountain terrain my entire life. I'm ready to learn and contribute to the mission." Bradley studied her personnel file, noting her exceptional training scores and instructors' comments. Despite his reservations about her lack of combat experience, he needed every qualified soldier available. "You'll be working with Sergeant First Class David Morrison," he said finally. "He's been here for 6 months and knows the area better than anyone. Learn from him, follow his lead, and maybe you'll live long enough to be useful." Sergeant Morrison was everything Sarah expected from a veteran sniper. Quiet, observant, and deadly serious about his profession, he had multiple combat deployments and a reputation for making difficult shots under extreme pressure. When Sarah reported to him that afternoon, she could see him evaluating her capabilities with the practiced eye of someone whose life depended on accurate assessments. "So you're my new partner," Morrison said without preamble. "I've read your training records, impressive scores, but this isn't the range at Fort Benning. Out here, people shoot back, and they've been doing it a lot longer than you have." Over the next several days, Morrison introduced Sarah to the unique challenges of operating in Afghanistan. The altitude affected ballistics calculations. The terrain offered both excellent concealment and deadly exposure, and the enemy was skilled at using the mountainous environment to their advantage. Their first mission together was a reconnaissance patrol to observe a valley where intelligence reports indicated increased Taliban activity. Morrison wanted to evaluate Sarah's fieldcraft skills before committing to more dangerous operations. The patrol began before dawn, with Sarah and Morrison moving carefully through terrain that seemed designed to test every skill they possessed. The mountains rose nearly vertical on both sides, creating natural corridors that could easily become kill zones if they encountered enemy forces. Sarah's movement was smooth and quiet, drawing on techniques she had learned during hunting trips in Montana's wilderness. Morrison noted approvingly that she instinctively chose the best routes, used available cover effectively, and maintained proper spacing without constant reminders. They established their observation post on a ridge overlooking the target valley, constructing a hide site that would conceal them from enemy observation while providing clear fields of fire. From their position, they could observe several kilometers of terrain that served as a major infiltration route for Taliban fighters moving between Pakistan and their operational areas. The vigil lasted 3 days, during which Sarah demonstrated the patience and discipline that separated professional snipers from ordinary soldiers. She remained motionless for hours at a time, scanning the terrain through her scope and documenting everything she observed. On the second day, they spotted a group of armed men moving through the valley below. Morrison studied them through his spotting scope while Sarah tracked them through her rifle scope, both snipers gathering intelligence about enemy movements and capabilities. Count 12 military-age males, armed with AK-47s and what looks like a PKM machine gun. Morrison whispered into his radio, reporting their observations to the command post. Sarah confirmed his count and added details about their movement patterns and apparent destination. The intelligence they gathered would be used to plan future operations against the Taliban network operating in the area. Their first combat engagement came 2 weeks later during an operation to capture a high-value target in a remote village. Sarah and Morrison were positioned as overwatch for an infantry assault team, responsible for providing covering fire and eliminating any threats that might compromise the mission. The operation began smoothly, with the assault team approaching the target building under cover of darkness. Sarah lay motionless in her hide site 800 meters away, her rifle trained on potential escape routes, while Morrison provided target information through his spotting scope. The situation deteriorated rapidly when the assault team was detected by sentries who had not been accounted for in the mission planning. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions around the village, and Sarah could see muzzle flashes appearing from windows and rooftops. Multiple shooters, second building from the left, Morrison called out, his voice calm despite the chaos unfolding below. Sarah quickly acquired the target he had identified, a Taliban fighter firing an AK-47 from an upstairs window. The range was nearly 700 meters, with challenging wind conditions and the added pressure of knowing that American lives depended on her accuracy. She controlled her breathing, calculated the necessary adjustments for wind and elevation, and squeezed the trigger in one smooth motion. The result was immediate and final. The enemy fire from that position ceased instantly. Over the next 20 minutes, Sarah engaged 6 different targets as the Taliban fighters attempted to encircle the assault team. Each shot was precisely placed, each target eliminated with clinical efficiency. Her performance under fire demonstrated that all her training had prepared her for exactly this type of situation. The assault team successfully captured their target and withdrew without casualties, largely due to the covering fire provided by Sarah and Morrison. As they moved back to their extraction point, Morrison looked at his young partner with new respect. "Outstanding shooting, Mitchell," he said simply. "You saved lives tonight." Word of Sarah's performance spread quickly through the small community of special operations soldiers operating in the region. Her ability to make precise shots under extreme pressure, combined with her calm professionalism during combat, established her reputation as a sniper who could be trusted with the most critical missions. Captain Bradley's attitude toward his new sniper team changed dramatically after reviewing the after-action reports from their recent operations. Sarah had proven that her lack of combat experience was more than compensated for by exceptional skill and unshakable composure under fire. "I owe you an apology, Mitchell," he told her during their next briefing. "I was wrong to question your capabilities based on your experience level. You've proven yourself in combat, and that's what matters out here." The missions continued throughout the winter months, with Sarah and Morrison conducting reconnaissance operations, providing overwatch for assault teams, and engaging high-value targets throughout their area of operations. Sarah's reputation continued to grow as she consistently demonstrated exceptional marksmanship skills combined with tactical intelligence and unwavering reliability. The defining moment of her deployment came during a complex operation to eliminate a Taliban commander who had been responsible for numerous attacks on coalition forces. Intelligence indicated that the target would be meeting with subordinates in a remote compound that could only be effectively engaged from extreme range. Sarah and Morrison spent 2 days moving into position, traveling through some of the most dangerous terrain in their operational area to establish a hide site that would provide the necessary fields of fire. The final approach required them to climb nearly vertical rock faces while carrying full combat equipment and precision shooting systems. Their hide site was established on a rocky outcrop that provided concealment while offering clear views of the target compound nearly 1,200 meters away. The distance was at the extreme limit of their weapons system capabilities and would require perfect conditions and flawless execution to be successful. They maintained observation of the compound for 36 hours, documenting patterns of activity and waiting for their target to appear. The Taliban commander was known to be extremely cautious, varying his movements and using multiple security measures to avoid detection. When he finally appeared, the engagement window was limited to only a few seconds. Sarah had been tracking the movement of personnel in and around the compound when Morrison identified their primary target emerging from the main building. Target acquired. Range 1,200 meters. Wind from the right at 8 miles per hour, Morrison called out, providing the information Sarah needed for her ballistic calculations. The shot required her to compensate for significant bullet drop, wind drift, and the thin mountain air that affected projectile performance. Sarah made the necessary adjustments to her scope, controlled her breathing to steady her aim, and waited for the optimal moment to fire. The sound of the rifle shot echoed across the valley as Sarah's bullet flew toward its target. For what seemed like an eternity, both snipers watched through their scopes as the projectile covered the distance to the compound. The result was exactly what they had hoped for. The Taliban commander dropped immediately, struck center mass by a shot that would be discussed in sniper circles for years to come. The elimination of such a high-value target from such an extreme range represented the pinnacle of precision marksmanship. As they began their withdrawal from the position, Morrison shook his head in amazement. 1,200 meters in these conditions with that wind. That's the best shot I've ever seen anyone make in combat. News of the engagement reached higher headquarters within hours, where senior officers recognized the exceptional nature of the shot and its impact on their ongoing operations. Sarah had eliminated one of the most dangerous enemy commanders in the region with a single bullet fired from nearly 3/4 of a mile away. The nickname Black Talon emerged from this engagement, coined by the intelligence analysts who had been tracking the Taliban commander's activities. Like a bird of prey, striking from impossible distances, Sarah had demonstrated the kind of lethal precision that became legendary among both friendly forces and the enemy. As her deployment neared its end, Sarah had established herself as one of the most effective snipers operating in Afghanistan. Her combination of exceptional marksmanship skills, tactical intelligence, and unshakable composure under pressure had made her invaluable to the special operations community. But the greatest test of her abilities was yet to come, waiting in the form of a mission that would push her skills beyond anything she had previously encountered and establish her legend forever in the annals of military history. The mission briefing took place in a secure facility at Bagram Air Base, where representatives from multiple special operations units had gathered to plan what would become one of the most complex operations of the Afghanistan conflict. Sarah Mitchell sat among the assembled warriors, her Black Talon reputation having earned her a place at the table with some of the military's most elite soldiers. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the same officer who had addressed Sarah's basic training graduation years earlier, now served as the commanding officer for special operations in eastern Afghanistan. She stood before the assembled team, her expression grave as she outlined the mission parameters. Intelligence indicates that a high-level meeting is scheduled to take place in 72 hours. Colonel Hayes began, activating a large display screen that showed satellite imagery of a remote mountain compound. We have credible information that this gathering will include several Taliban commanders responsible for coordinating attacks throughout the region, as well as representatives from foreign terrorist organizations. The compound was located in some of the most challenging terrain in Afghanistan, perched on a mountain peak that offered commanding views in all directions while being nearly impossible to approach undetected. Previous attempts to target the facility had failed due to its remote location and sophisticated defensive measures. The primary objective is intelligence gathering, Hayes continued. We need to identify the participants, document their discussions, and gather actionable intelligence about future operations. The secondary objective, if the opportunity presents itself, is the elimination of high-value targets. Sarah studied the terrain features displayed on the screen, automatically calculating fields of fire and potential sniper positions. The compound's location would require an approach through nearly 20 kilometers of hostile territory, followed by an ascent up terrain that seemed almost vertical in some places. Major Frank Thompson, the ground force commander, outlined the assault plan using detailed topographic maps. We'll insert by helicopter approximately 15 kilometers from the target, then move on foot through these valleys to avoid detection. The approach will take approximately 18 hours, with the final assault scheduled to coincide with the intelligence meeting. Sarah noted that the plan called for multiple sniper teams to provide overwatch and eliminate any threats that might compromise the ground assault. When Thompson asked for volunteers for the most challenging position, a hide site that would require a dangerous climb to within 800 meters of the compound, Sarah immediately raised her hand. "Ma'am, that position requires someone to climb nearly vertical rock faces while carrying full equipment," Thompson warned. "The approach is extremely dangerous, and extraction would be difficult if things go wrong." "I can handle it, sir," Sarah replied confidently. "I grew up climbing mountains, and 800 meters is well within my effective range." Sergeant Morrison, who had been selected as her spotter for the mission, nodded his agreement. Over their months of working together, he had come to trust Sarah's judgment completely and knew that her mountain climbing experience made her uniquely qualified for the assignment. Colonel Hayes studied Sarah for a long moment before speaking. "Mitchell, this is potentially a career-defining mission. The intelligence value of this target cannot be overstated, and the margin for error is essentially zero. Are you certain you're prepared for this level of responsibility?" "Yes, ma'am," Sarah answered without hesitation. "I understand the stakes, and I'm ready to execute whatever the mission requires." The preparation phase consumed the next 48 hours as team members checked equipment, rehearsed procedures, and studied every detail of the target area. Sarah spent hours examining satellite photographs and elevation charts, planning her route to the sniper position and identifying alternative firing positions if the primary location became compromised. Her equipment load for the mission included her precision rifle system, 600 rounds of match-grade ammunition, specialized climbing gear, communications equipment, and survival supplies for potentially several days of operations. The total weight exceeded 80 pounds, all of which would have to be carried up nearly vertical terrain in darkness. The helicopter insertion took place on a moonless night, with the aircraft landing briefly in a valley surrounded by peaks that towered thousands of feet above them. Sarah and Morrison, along with the other sniper teams, separated from the main assault force and began their individual approaches to their assigned positions. The climb to Sarah's hide site was even more challenging than the mission planners had anticipated. The rock face was loose and unstable in many places, requiring her to move slowly and carefully to avoid creating noise that might alert enemy sentries. Several times, she found herself clinging to the mountain with fingertips and boot edges, her heavy equipment load threatening to pull her into the darkness below. Morrison, following 30 meters behind, marveled at Sarah's climbing ability. She moved up the treacherous terrain with the confidence of someone who had spent her childhood exploring similar mountains, finding handholds and routes that seemed impossible to less experienced climbers. It took nearly 6 hours to reach their designated position, but when they finally established their hide site, Sarah knew the effort had been worthwhile. From their concealed location among the rocks, they had a perfect view of the compound below and clear fields of fire to all critical areas. The target building was a traditional Afghan structure built into the mountainside, with thick walls and small windows that would make interior observation difficult. But Sarah could see the main entrance clearly, as well as several areas where personnel might gather outside the building. As dawn broke over the mountains, the compound began showing signs of activity. Through their spotting scopes, Sarah and Morrison observed armed guards taking positions around the perimeter, while vehicles arrived carrying what appeared to be important passengers. Multiple high-value individuals arriving. Morrison whispered into his radio, providing a running commentary of their observations to the command element monitoring from a distance. Sarah tracked the movements through her rifle scope, noting the security procedures and identifying potential targets based on the intelligence photographs she had memorized during mission preparation. The gathering appeared to be even more significant than originally anticipated, with representatives from several different terrorist organizations arriving throughout the morning. The crucial moment came just before noon, when the assault team reported that they were in position and ready to begin their approach to the compound. Sarah's role was to provide overwatch and eliminate any threats that might compromise the ground force, but she also had authorization to engage high-value targets if clear shots presented themselves. The first challenge came when sentries in the compound's guard towers began scanning the surrounding terrain with binoculars. Sarah remained motionless in her hide site, her ghillie suit and natural camouflage rendering her invisible against the rock face, but the increased security posture indicated that the enemy was aware something was happening. Heightened alert status, Morrison reported. Multiple guards conducting surveillance sweeps. The assault team's approach was detected when they were still 300 meters from the compound, triggering an immediate response from the defenders. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions as Taliban fighters attempted to repel the attack. Sarah's first target was a machine gunner positioned on the compound's roof who was directing deadly fire toward the advancing assault team. The range was 750 meters with a significant crosswind, but the target was clearly visible through her scope. She calculated the necessary adjustments, controlled her breathing, and fired a single shot that struck the machine gunner center mass. The heavy weapons fire from that position ceased immediately, allowing the assault team to continue their advance. Over the next 20 minutes, Sarah engaged multiple targets as the battle intensified around the compound. Each shot was precisely placed, each target eliminated with the clinical efficiency that had made her reputation. The assault team's advance continued steadily forward, protected by the deadly accurate covering fire from their sniper overwatch. The situation changed dramatically when several high-value targets emerged from the main building and began moving toward vehicles parked behind the compound. Sarah recognized two of the individuals from intelligence photographs as commanders responsible for coordinating attacks throughout the region. High-value targets moving to vehicles, Morrison called out, providing range and wind information for the engagement. The first target was at 820 meters, moving quickly toward a truck that would provide cover once he reached it. Sarah tracked him through her scope, leading the target to account for his movement, and fired just as he reached the vehicle. The shot struck him as he opened the truck door, eliminating one of the most wanted Taliban commanders in Afghanistan. Before his body hit the ground, Sarah was already tracking her second target, who had observed his companion's fate and was now moving erratically toward a different vehicle. The second engagement was more challenging, requiring Sarah to compensate for the target's unpredictable movement pattern while calculating for the increased range of nearly 900 meters. She waited for him to pause momentarily behind a low wall, then fired a shot that struck him as he attempted to sprint toward cover. The psychological impact of watching two of their leaders eliminated by precise long-range fire was devastating to the remaining defenders. Resistance began to crumble as Taliban fighters abandoned their positions and fled into the surrounding mountains. The assault team secured the compound within minutes, capturing valuable intelligence materials and several mid-level commanders who had been too shocked by the sniper fire to attempt escape. The mission was an overwhelming success, yielding intelligence that would disrupt terrorist operations throughout the region for months to come. As Sarah and Morrison prepared for their withdrawal from the mountain position, they received an unexpected radio transmission from the command post at Bagram Air Base. General Robert Martinez, the overall commander for operations in Afghanistan, was personally monitoring the mission and wanted to speak with the sniper team. Black Talon, this is General Martinez, came the voice over the encrypted radio frequency. Outstanding performance today. Your precision fire was instrumental in the mission's success, and you've eliminated some of the most dangerous enemies we've been tracking. Congratulations on a job exceptionally well done. The use of her operational call sign by the commanding general was a recognition that Sarah's reputation had reached the highest levels of military leadership. The farm girl from Montana had become a legendary figure whose skills were respected and feared throughout the special operations community. The extraction from a mountain position required the same careful climbing techniques that had brought them to the hide site, but the descent was complicated by exhaustion and the psychological aftermath of intense combat. Sarah moved methodically down the rock face, her years of mountain experience keeping her safe during the most dangerous part of their return journey. When they finally reached the extraction point 18 hours later, Sarah was met by Colonel Hayes, who had flown forward from Bagram to personally debrief the sniper teams. The mission's success had exceeded all expectations, and Sarah's performance had been the critical factor in achieving their objectives. Mitchell, You've established yourself as one of the finest snipers in military history, Hayes told her during their private conversation. The shots you made today, under those conditions, and at those ranges, represent the pinnacle of marksmanship excellence. You should be proud of what you've accomplished. The mission became a case study that was taught at sniper schools around the world, with Sarah's engagements cited as examples of perfect technique under extreme pressure. The nickname Black Talon became synonymous with precision, professionalism, and deadly effectiveness. When Sarah finally returned home to Montana 6 months later, she found that news of her military service had reached Whitefish through the network of military families and veterans who kept track of local soldiers serving overseas. The small town that had sent a scared farm girl to war welcomed home a decorated hero whose achievements had brought honor to their entire community. At the homecoming celebration in the high school gymnasium, Sarah stood before the assembled crowd, wearing her dress uniform adorned with ribbons and badges that told the story of exceptional service. When asked to speak about her experiences, she chose her words carefully, knowing that many details would forever remain classified. "I want to thank this community for the support you've shown my family during my deployment," she said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that had been forged in the mountains of Afghanistan. "The skills I learned growing up here, the values you taught me, and the determination that comes from this place, all of that contributed to whatever success I've achieved in the military." She paused, looking out at faces that included her teachers, neighbors, and lifelong friends. "Most importantly, I want you to know that everything I did over there was motivated by a desire to protect the freedoms and way of life we cherish here at home. That's what service means, using your abilities to defend something greater than yourself." Years later, when military historians wrote about the evolution of modern warfare and the role of precision marksmanship in contemporary conflicts, they invariably included the story of Black Talon. Sarah Mitchell had proven that exceptional skill, properly applied, could change the outcome of entire operations and save countless lives. The legend born in the mountains of Afghanistan would inspire a new generation of soldiers who understood that excellence in their chosen profession was not just a personal goal, but a sacred responsibility to their comrades and their country. In a world where precision mattered more than volume of fire, where intelligence was more valuable than brute force, warriors like Black Talon represented the future of military effectiveness. The farm girl who had once been ridiculed for requesting a rifle had silenced her critics forever with 3 simple words that would echo through military history: Black Talon Mark.